Part 16. Confucianism is the big shot. Mozi wants to flip the table. Ever since old Master Confucius passed away, his Confucianism shot up like a successful rocket launch, quickly becoming the official classic doctrine of the time. Confucius may have had a rough life. He famously called himself a homeless dog, but after death, his status was elevated to something impossible to climb to, like the heavens. 200 years later, even the philosopher Han Fei acknowledged it. Confucianism was the shan shui, prominent study, meaning it had the most social influence, and if you didn't study it, you were out. Naturally, young Mozi started with Confucianism. He found all the masters he could and devoured the classics. However, Mozi was a slash-and-burn youth from a poor background. Studying alone wouldn't pay the rent. He had to work to support himself. So, he mastered carpentry and traveled extensively to broaden his horizons. He had no idea at the time that these side gigs would turn him into history's most interdisciplinary philosopher. He didn't just do philosophy, he was also a part-time city wall architect, military logistics expert, supply chain manager, and even found time to dabble in the physics of light propagation. A philosopher dares to peek at nature. In ancient China, a philosopher researching the mysteries of nature was practically synonymous with unprofessional conduct. The great masters of the time, including the venerable Confucius, focused solely on the ethics and relationships between people and people, or people and rulers. They were the ancient masters of interpersonal relations. As for the natural world we live in, nobody cared. People just believed that heaven moves vigorously, Tianxing Dawn, heaven is hitting the gym daily, so the superior man must constantly strive for self-improvement. We must keep working hard. But how does heaven move, and how is it vigorous? No one bothered to find out. Exploring these things was dismissed as minor skills that the masters scorned. There's a classic anecdote. When Confucius's student wanted to learn agriculture and horticulture, Confucius flatly refused and scolded him. Wasting time on such trivial matters is ridiculous. However, Mozi did take a peek. He secretly researched a bit of nature. Unfortunately, after Mozi, this path of scientific inquiry dried up again. It wasn't until 100 years later that another heavyweight, Zhuangzi, proposed the ideal, control the mandate of heaven and utilize it. This whole situation is what led to the 18th century German philosopher Hegel to gripe, China has no philosophers. If one strictly uses the Pythagorean definition, a philosopher must study the mysteries of nature. That's an irritating thing to hear, but we can smugly shrug our philosophers or not, our civilization has endured for over 4,000 years. The Great Divide. Mozi rejects ritual and launches Moism. During his Confucian studies, Mozi constantly felt awkward, like wearing a formal suit that didn't fit. He felt Confucianism made things too complicated, especially the elaborate ritual process, which he found intolerable. The differences were night and day, especially on hot topics like fate, spirits, ghosts, and funeral rites. Mozi gradually felt a deep urge to break away. I must start my own school of thought. Finally, the day arrived. He opened his own school and began teaching. Thus, Moism was born, standing shoulder to shoulder with Confucianism, and also recognized as another shan shui. Mozi, having spent years among the lower classes, had witnessed too many dramas of states rising and falling. He constantly pondered, why do some states rise gloriously but perish quickly? And why do others enjoy good order and a peaceful, prosperous populace? He believed he found the core reason, summarized in two simple words, promote the capable. Mozi's logic was straightforward. If a state honors the capable, then regardless of whether you're a farmer or craftsman, as long as you have real talent, you should be granted the three treasures of governance: high office, generous salary, and heavy authority. He argued passionately, low office, won't earn the people's respect. Thin salary won't earn the people's trust. Light authority won't earn the people's awe. Operating a nation under this appoint the capable system, he argued, made it impossible not to be strong, prosperous, and well-governed. The two masters, meritocracy versus simple living. Interestingly, Laozi, who lived 100 years before Mozi, held the exact opposite view. Laozi believed the root cause of social chaos was that people overly admired the sages and overly pursued wealth. His prescription was, abolish sageness, abandon wisdom. Then society would naturally become peaceful. These two masters, both called Z, went their separate ways in their pursuit of truth. This difference in perception sounds awfully familiar to that famous modern slogan, high salaries nurture integrity. Mozi would probably give a thumbs up. Laozi would certainly shake his head. But in modern society, can integrity truly be nurtured solely by a salary? This is a philosophical conundrum spanning 2 millennia. If a nation embarks on the road to prosperity, an inevitable side effect will emerge: extravagance. Countless rulers fell because of the famous warning, success comes from diligence and frugality, failure from extravagance. So Mozi introduced his second demand, again in 2 simple words: frugal expenditure. Mozi was a steadfast advocate of minimalism. Just enough is sufficient. All extra non-functional embellishments should be eliminated. For instance, the function of clothing is to keep warm in winter and cool in summer. As long as it fulfills this function, any unnecessary decoration should be discarded. Whether this teaching holds up in modern society is debatable. After all, people value beauty, not just function. However, there is a modern internet joke that perfectly matches Mozi's spirit. In winter, wear as much as you can. In summer, wear as little as you can. If Mozi were alive today, he might just click like on that bit of online wit. Funeral feuds. Mozi versus Confucian showmanship. The issue of frugal expenditure was a major reason for Mozi's split from Confucianism. Mozi angrily accused the Confucians of being too extravagant, especially with funeral rites. He criticized the Confucian push for extravagant burial and prolonged mourning. Inner coffin, outer coffin, mountains of burial goods, and years of mourning, all just to comply with ritual formality. Mozi flatly disagreed. He scoffed. If an officer quits to mourn for 3 years, who will handle the nation's affairs? The government would collapse. Unfortunately, over the next 2 millennia, the Confucian system of ancient Chinese mourning seems to have won out. Ancient China maintained the Dingyu law, requiring officials to resign their posts for 1 to several years upon the death of a parent or grandparent. Yet, ancient people always had a workaround for the policy. They invented the Dua Qing measure. Under specific national circumstances, crucial officials could be exempted from the mourning period and ordered to continue working. So whether or not one had to go home and weep for 3 years ultimately depended on the person and the situation. It was flexible. So what kind of impact do you think a philosopher who was also a carpenter and dabbled in physics would have pushing his promote the capable and frugal expenditure ideals in that chaotic era?